As we said earlier, up to 6,000 elderly people could be dying prematurely each year because of widespread overprescription of powerful drugs to dementia patients in nursing homes. While one expert has put the number in the thousands, another has told Lateline it certainly runs into the hundreds. Experts say anti-psychotic drugs can leave patients immobilised and unable to speak, and are often used unnecessarily to keep dementia sufferers quiet for overworked staff. But the drugs can increase the risk of death by 50%, and family members are often left in the dark about their use. Margot O'Neill has this exclusive report.
John Burns's family thought they were doing the best thing for their father when they booked him into a nearby nursing home in Adelaide offering specialist dementia care. Just 63 years old, he had severe symptoms such as disinhibited sexual behaviour. He never hurt anyone, but his lewd remarks and wandering put him at risk of harm. What then happened to John Burns, while extreme, is not uncommon according to experts.
Don't think in your worst nightmares you could have ever imagined it could have gone so wrong.
John Burns walked into the nursing home able to feed and clean himself, able to converse with his family. Within 24 hours, he was so doped up they could barely wake him. Within a week, he was unable to sit upright or converse at all. Within 12 days, he was dead.
I went down to the lounge room and only to find Dad sitting in the lounge in his own urine, and he had jelly in his eyes. His eyes had turned to jelly, and the jelly was like coming out of his eyes, and he was away with the fairies. Like he didn't know me, and of course, you know, we hadn't had that problem with the dementia, and so I was rubbing his hand and going, "Dad, it's Jodie, it's Jodie."
Jodie Playford knows now that her father had a stroke. She also knows that during his short time in the nursing home, he was massively dosed with dangerous anti-psychotic drugs that can heighten the risk of stroke and death. But why was he drugged? Soon after arriving at the nursing home, John Burns tried to leave. He guessed the security code and wandered outside the locked dementia wing. He also made sexual remarks to staff, raised his fist and touched a female staff member's breast.
None of this is unusual behaviour for dementia patients who often become agitated when adjusting to new environments. No one was hurt, and each time John Burns became compliant again.
But some staff were worried enough to call a doctor who prescribed the powerful anti-psychotic haloperidol, which he was given repeatedly in large doses.
This is a level 4 chemical restraint, which means your life's in danger, the client's life's in danger. It drops them to the floor instantly.
One of South Australia's leading geriatric experts testified at a coronial hearing into John Burns's death that he believed the overall dose over the next 5 days was excessive.
He did have a very high dose of particularly haloperidol, I think, which is a very potent antipsychotic. I think he had about 35 milligrams. I would ordinarily give, in that circumstance, at best 5 orally.
In fact, John Burns was given 45 milligrams in 5 days, as well as other antipsychotics and sedatives. The coroner heard that sometimes he was drugged just because he was restless or wanting to go for a quiet walk in the corridor at night.
And, you know, even the coroner said, well, what else is the man meant to do in a facility? You know, what's wrong with going for a walk?
The coronial inquest heard the doctor believed he'd prescribed an appropriate amount and that he was concerned for the safety of nursing home staff because John Burns had become aggressive and abusive. The South Australian coroner, Mark Johns, found last year that John Burns died of a stroke in 2006. He did not link it to antipsychotic drugs, But he noted that Dr Whitehead's expert concerns that haloperidol played a role may well be correct.
Essentially, the man died of a stroke, and that had been acquired after what seemed to my mind significant prescription or overprescription of antipsychotics to treat his behaviour. I thought it was a really important example of how these medications that we give to people with dementia, a very common problem, and behavioural disturbance and dementia is a very common problem, have serious and high-risk side effects. And it was clear to me that the family had never been engaged in a discussion about that.
Dr Whitehead says while there are many excellent nursing homes, he's concerned about a lack of properly trained staff to care for the 140,000 dementia patients who now dominate residential care and whose numbers are set to explode.
I think there is a sense that the aged care industry is less tolerant to patients with behavioural disturbance. There is a tendency to gravitate towards blaming the person for their behaviour.
Jodie Playford was at her father's bedside when the doctor who'd prescribed the antipsychotics arrived.
Mum and I couldn't quite believe it really, because he looked at Dad and he said, "You know what you did, Mr. Burns. You know, we're not going to tolerate that sort of behaviour in here, and you know what's going to happen if you continue to do this."
Many of the same issues were faced by Beverly Harvey and her family when their mother went into a Gold Coast nursing home late last year suffering dementia. Even though she was 93 years old, Anetta McKay was mobile and could converse with her family. But within 2 months, she'd lost 16 kilograms and was hard to wake.
We walked in and our mother looked dead. Naturally, while I was there, I suspected she was heavily drugged, so that's why I spoke to the doctor. He said, "Your mother is on massive amounts of drugs."
Beverly and her family were told their mother was calling out at night and using vulgar language that upset other residents. Once the sedation began, it didn't seem to stop.
They were still drugging her even though she was well and truly comatose, not eating, not drinking, just sleeping.
Experts have told Lateline the science is clear. Antipsychotics are not beneficial for the vast majority of dementia patients whose behaviour can often be managed by better trained staff.
We also have some limited evidence that stopping those medications improves their outcomes, improves their behaviour and improves their cognition. So from my perspective, the correct management of behavioural problems in dementia is nearly always reducing medications, not starting them.
The antipsychotic drugs were stopped when Beverly's mother went to hospital. Suddenly, Anetta McKay was able to chat to her family again. But when she went back to the nursing home...
Well, she was like a zombie. The last day, I put my arm around her and I said, "We're going now." And she didn't open her eyes. She just made sure I kept there. She was sort of holding me in and said, "Beverly, don't leave me here."
Her family managed to have the antipsychotic stopped in January after 4 months. Anetta McKay died in April. Up to 60% of nursing home residents are on psychiatric drugs. Up to 30% are on powerful antipsychotics.
So in many cases, yes, we are treating people with dementia in order to make life easier for the carers and the healthcare workers.
But it comes at a high price. Professor Lakuta calculated how many patients were dying 6 to 12 months prematurely each year because of the overprescription of antipsychotics. His figures range from 500 to 6,000. What is the most likely number?
I think the answer is thousands. I think there are probably thousands of deaths where you could attribute the death to the use of these medications.
Were you aware that the figure would be so high before you did these numbers?
No, I wasn't. I feel shocked, very sad for the elderly people.
While not commenting on specific cases, Queensland specialist geriatric psychiatrist Professor Gerard Byrne says there are likely to be hundreds of premature deaths each year, with thousands more adversely affected.
Yeah, I think there are likely to be hundreds, if not thousands, of people severely adversely affected each year in this country. I have certainly seen on a fairly regular basis older people with dementia who have been prescribed anti-psychotic medication either inappropriately or in excessive dose or for too long a period. The problem is that they seem to be used indiscriminately and significantly overused, really.
People with dementia are human beings and they need to be treated with respect, and sedating them because of their behaviours just feels wrong as a human being.
Margot O'Neill, Lateline.